Blake, first of all, it's just great to have you with us. How much do you love this time of the year as we look at the SEC tournament and get ready for March Madness?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Roger. I think this is one of my favorite times of the year. I think it's so exciting to see. There's so much basketball on all the time. I mean, starting today, we're going to have games starting at like 10 or 11 a.m. and going until, we're ready to go to sleep. So as a basketball fan, that's really exciting for me. And then from the SEC standpoint, specifically this year, I mean, there's no better event to be a basketball fan or a fan of an SEC basketball team because there's so many teams this year that are good and so many teams that are going to be competing for national titles, Final Fours, and 14 of the 16 teams have a good shot of going to the NCAA tournament, which is kind of unheard of. So you have a conference that's been better than we've ever seen in basketball, and you have them all gathered in one place, playing each other. Every game is interesting to me. Every game has something that you can be watching for. So, I mean, it's a great time of year, a great time to be, a great year to be an SEC basketball fan this season, and happy for the people that are up in Nashville and able to come see some of these games.
Certainly excited about what's ahead for Alabama, not just this weekend, but coming up in March Madness. Let's just take an overall look at this season. Alabama entering this tournament, getting the double bye, potentially a 1 or a 2 seed for the NCAA tournament. Is this about where you expected this team to be, even going back to some of the early season projections we had back in November?
I did. I thought an SEC regular season title was possible. I never had that as an expectation, so to speak, because I think that's a hard burden to put on any team. But really, before the season, I said, I expect them to be around the double bye, around maybe 13-5, 14-4 in the league. And that was even before I knew how good this league was going to be, before any of us knew. So for them to be 13-5, I think that's around, meeting expectations, so to speak. Some fans may be disappointed that they didn't win the regular season title, but I'm sure a lot of those fans also didn't expect Auburn to be as good as they were throughout this entire season and to be the number one team for a good chunk of conference play. So I think the way that they performed, also, you got to factor in some of the injuries that Alabama has had to deal with. I'm sure if you went into this season knowing that they weren't going to have Latrell Wrightsell for the last 80% of the season, if they knew a five-star freshman in Darion Reed was going to be kind of off and on and not available for the majority of conference play, that might have changed some people's expectations. So I know some Alabama fans maybe wanted more than the 3 seed here in Nashville, but I don't think it's a disappointment by any means. It's been a great SEC conference this season, like I've already said, going 13-5 in that league. That's no small feat. That's something that's difficult to do. They have a lot of really good wins. They have one of the best resumes in the country, and they find themselves in a pretty good spot here in Nashville with a chance to make a run and win an SEC tournament, and also setting themselves up for a really good seed in the NCAA tournament starting next week.
What a difference a week makes. The tough loss with the buzzer beater against Tennessee, the week before, those last 30 seconds certainly didn't go the way Alabama wanted it to. But then you look at the Auburn game, finished it out well in the second half, and then winning in overtime on the Mark Sears buzzer beater. Does that just prove how good this team can be? The kind of dramatic swing we saw from one Saturday to the next?
Yeah, I think it does. I think a lot of people were maybe a little down on Alabama coming into this Auburn game, considering the fact that they lost 4 of their last 6 games. But a lot of those obviously were to really good teams. You have Tennessee, who's I think ranked in the top 7 or 8 in the AP poll. You lost to them on a buzzer beater, a game you really should have won. Obviously, there's no shoulds, like you either do it or you don't. But you have a 4-point lead with 30 seconds left. They probably should have won that game. And then a loss at home to a really good Florida team, who I think has a really good shot of winning a national championship. And then you go before that, you had a loss to a Missouri team who's solidly in the top 20 and was on fire that night, and a loss to number 1 Auburn. So you have a lot of losses to good teams, but I think that made some people think, well, Alabama's good, but maybe they're not good against elite competition. And that maybe kind of changed some people's belief. But then you go in and you go on the road to number 1, and you're able to get a win in overtime at the buzzer, kind of flipping the script on some of the late game issues that they had against Tennessee, able to actually execute in some late game situations. And I think it just reaffirms to everyone that this Alabama team is among the elite teams in college basketball. And not only do they have a lot of wins this season, but they're capable of beating really good teams. They have a win over Auburn. They have a win over Houston. That's 2 of the top 4. Those 2 are the 1 seeds that are projected in the NCAA tournament right now. So that should kind of affirm to everyone that, yes, this team is really good, and also this team can play among the elite of the elites in college basketball. And pretty much anybody on any given night, Alabama has a chance to beat. They're as good as anybody, and when they're playing at their best, they might be the best team in the country.
So now, what's the approach for Alabama for this tournament? We've seen the Crimson Tide win it a couple times under Nate Oates. Last year, one and done, and then had that great run and all the way to the Final Four. So with that kind of mindset, how is this team approaching this weekend?
They're approaching it exactly how I think you'd expect them to approach it. They're coming here to try to win it, and that's what they said. And Nate Oates said it in his press conference yesterday. Mo Diabate said the same thing. And somebody asked Nate Oates, interestingly, kind of the thing you mentioned, the two times that they won the SEC tournament under Nate Oates, they lost early in the NCAA tournament in the Sweet 16. Then last year they lose the first game, and then they make a run to the Final Four. Nate Oates also brought up during that question that back in 2022 they lost the first game and then lost their first game in the NCAA tournament. So it's not really a one-to-one. There's a lot of variables that kind of go with it. In the same vein, you had Auburn, I think 5 or 6 years ago, they went and won the SEC tournament, and that sparked them into a Final Four run because of the momentum that they were able to build at Nashville. So really, any team should be approaching it going to win. You want to keep building momentum. You want to keep winning games, build that confidence, and that's what Alabama's doing. They're not a team that's going to be like, oh, we need to come here and maybe not try our hardest in this game, try to get some rest, get our legs back under us. Like, they're competitors. Nate Oates is a competitor. All of these players are competitors. They want to come here and win, and that's fully their intention to do this week.
What's the latest on Darion Reed? And if he is healthy and able to play for the Crimson Tide, how will he impact this team?
Yeah, I think he's been practicing and he hasn't been going live in 5-on-5, but he's been doing basketball things in practice, according to what Nate Oates told us yesterday. And he said if he has a good practice today, he should be cleared to play this weekend in the SEC tournament, which is a big boost. I don't know if he's going to play. I don't think at all that he's going to play major minutes, just considering how long he's been out. I'm sure he's incredibly rusty. Hasn't been doing a lot of, like I said, 5-on-5 basketball things, but at the very least, it's another body that Alabama has, and we know how they've been missing guys with injury this year already, and Latrell Wrightsell and Houston Millett are both out for the year, and then you're redshirting Nas Cunningham. So you're already down 3 players of your 13-man roster. And without Darion Reed, they've been functioning on a 9-man rotation, which has been every player that they've had available throughout these last couple of weeks without Reed. So adding him, that gives rest to some of your other wings. You don't have to play Mo Diabate as many minutes. You can kind of save him for the spurts that he needs. You can give rest to guys like Chris Youngblood, the guys that play out on the wings, which is very helpful. Especially in a physical league where you might rack up a couple of fouls in this SEC tournament. Also, they're playing 3 games, or they're hoping to play 3 games in 3 days. You're going to be playing on back-to-back days. Having another body is super helpful with that, and hopefully that also gets him going a little bit and gets him more accustomed to playing more 5-on-5 and getting back in the swing of things, so that he could maybe be an even bigger impact in the NCAA tournament here next week and hopefully the week after that.
So whether it's coming up this weekend in Nashville for the SEC tournament or trying to make a deep run in March Madness, what would you tell Alabama fans would be some really reasons for optimism about this group to have a deep run?
Yeah, I think you just saw a perfect reason for optimism this past Saturday, going on the road and, like I said earlier, beating #1 Auburn. Like, they've been consistently one of the best teams in the country, maybe the best team in the country over the last couple of months, and Alabama went into their building and beat them. So that just tells you that Alabama is capable of beating any team in the country. Their defense has been trending up lately. If you look at an analytics site, Bart Torvik, he has Alabama as the 20th ranked defense over the last 3 weeks. So this is a team whose defense has struggled a little bit over the course of the season. They didn't really, they weren't playing to the level that I thought they were capable of. But you've seen in recent weeks, the defense is trending in a positive direction, which is something you want to see going into March. That's exactly what we saw last year whenever they really buckled down on the defensive end, and that kind of spurred their Final Four run. And then also, you've got Mark Sears. You've got an All-American level guard. And I've always said, and a lot of people have always said, that guards are what win you games in March. If you have a guard who can take over, that can propel you very far. And again, that's exactly what you saw last year. Mark Sears was unbelievable in the tournament. Over the last couple of weeks since he's moved off the ball, LeBaron Philon's been added to the starting lineup. He's been able to play more 2 guard rather than being the lead 1. That's really helped developed him. He's been more efficient from the field. So with him, with the way the defense is playing, with all of the offensive talent and weapons that you have getting healthier, with Darion Reed potentially coming back, there are tons of reasons for optimism that Alabama could win the SEC tournament this weekend and go really far in the NCAA tournament coming up.
And on the other side of the coin, what are some areas of concern for this group getting ready for March Madness?
I think the shooting has been a little volatile, and that's any team, but with this team, it's tough because there have been a couple of games where you have a shooter who's not shooting to the level that they're capable of. Chris Youngblood's had a couple games. Aiden Holloway's been off the last couple of games, and he was on an insane tear throughout SEC play. But you can always run into a game or run into a team and you don't shoot super well and it's an off night and they have a great night. Like that can happen to anybody. But really, I'm more optimistic than not because of not only that, but the way this team has been able to score at the rim, not just from the 3-point line. Like this isn't a live and die by the three team. They've had tons of games where they don't make a ton of threes and they're so good on the interior, like this past Saturday, where they score a ton of points at the rim and that propels them to a win. So you could always run into a team that gets hot. You could always have a game where you don't show up, you don't play your best. But whenever this team is playing to their potential, I think they're as good as anybody, and I think that's a good reason that they'll at least be making it to the Sweet 16 and onward. Because really, in the NCAA tournament, once you get there, no one knows what's going to happen. But if you win those two games and get there, that's good, and then you can kind of build on it from there.
So your focus is certainly going to be basketball over the next few weeks, covering this Crimson Tide basketball team under Nate Oates. But of course, the football team is out on the practice field, gearing up for what's coming up on A-Day in April. You and your coworkers at BamaOnline, what are some of the storylines you're keeping in mind as you think about Kalen DeBoer in spring practice number 2?
Well, obviously the quarterbacks are number one. I think that's on everybody's mind, but I don't think we're going to have any kind of answer throughout this spring. It's going to be a really good time for Ty Simpson, Austin Mack, and Keelan Russell to all be getting really big and important reps. And I know they're all cycling through. Everybody's working with the ones at different points. So that's going to be huge for the development of all three of those guys. I think they're all very capable. I think any of them could win the job. So that's one thing I'm watching. The other thing that's been notable is the amount of returners that this team has in their senior class. And I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but there's a good bit of guys who could have gone to the NFL, could have left early, and chose to come back, especially on the defensive side. So you've got a lot of leaders on this team, and that's something that they've talked about as we've spoken to them throughout the first week of spring practice last week. They're on spring break this week, and then they'll be back at it again next week. But all of the older leaders that we've talked about have talked about how important it is for them to be a player-led team and how they're kind of emphasizing that and pushing that. And you've got a lot of old veteran guys who can make that happen this year. So I think that's a really exciting thing for Alabama fans because usually whenever you have a strong group of returning seniors that all want to be leaders, it results in some really good things for the football team. So they're going to be doing that and building that leadership over the course of the spring, this summer. And I'm just excited to see it, come to the football field this fall and see what this team has.
Spring practice underway in Tuscaloosa, and of course, the basketball team getting set for March Madness, the SEC tournament this weekend. Blake Byler is going to cover it all for BamaOnline and On3. Blake, just thank you for the time you've given us here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. Have fun in Nashville coming up this weekend. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Roger.